It was 2 a.m. when screams and sounds of struggle echoed from upstairs. I immediately called the police, reporting an assault and a potentially dangerous situation. The police, however, sounded helpless. "Ma'am, we've checked. It's just a family dispute. Nothing to worry about." They had no idea I was a sound analysis expert, capable of unearthing the truth through mere sounds. At 2 a.m., I woke up to frantic gasps from the floor above. The resident chat group was already buzzing with activity. What? Have they no shame? So loud. "My child has school tomorrow. When will that noise finally stop?" I collected my thoughts and calmly typed a single message into the group. "Call the police." There's a murder happening upstairs. They're already dismembering the body. The culprit is using another sound to cover up the killing. My sudden words sent a chill down the residents' spines, silencing their arguments instantly. The group fell quiet. Seeing no one reacting, I called the police myself. "Hello? My upstairs neighbor is committing murder." I could almost feel the slight tremor on the other end of the line. 2 seconds later, the female operator asked, May I ask, know your upstairs neighbor is committing murder?" I calmly replied, "Because I am a sound analysis expert. I can distinguish the true origin of every sound. Just now, I heard gasps coming from upstairs. Those gasps were pre-recorded. Interspersed within them were brief cries for help. I heard the victim using her last ounce of strength to beg for her life, but it was in vain. The assailant is an adult man, robust and strong, which allowed him to overpower the victim in just 10 short seconds. The victim is a woman, her voice faint and soft. Combining my analysis, I believe my upstairs neighbor has murdered his wife. I've chatted with his wife in the resident group before. Her voice was just as faint and soft. I calmly and clearly recounted the results of my analysis. The female voice on the other end of the line shifted from disbelief to acknowledgement. Finally, she told me to provide my address and wait for the police. After hanging up, I continued to carefully listen to the movements outside. Just then, the upstairs door creaked open, followed by heavy footsteps. It seemed our neighbor, David Liu, was coming downstairs, getting closer and closer to my door. He must have seen what I wrote in the chat group, because his footsteps sounded incredibly hurried and tense. Sure enough, the next second, my door was pounded on. David Liu's booming voice rang out. "Are you slandering me? Accusing me of murder? If you're so good, show me the evidence." All the lights in my apartment were on, but I still felt a cold chill wash over me. I curled up on the sofa, not daring to speak, silently praying for the police to arrive quickly. Only a door separated me and David Liu. His rage was almost out of control. He started kicking the door hard, trying to force me out. But going out now would be no different from surrendering myself to death. To avoid his harassment, I could only cover my ears tightly. Seconds turned into minutes. After an unknown amount of time, the outside gradually quieted down. David Liu, realizing he was humiliating himself, decisively turned and ascended the stairs, returning home. 2 minutes later, a rhythmic knocking echoed again. This time, it was the police. They politely asked what had happened. I meticulously recounted everything I had heard. Finally, I led the officers upstairs. David Liu opened the door, and upon seeing the stern-faced police officers, his expression immediately changed. He trembled at the corner of his mouth. "Say, officers, this woman is deliberately slandering me, accusing me of murder, to frame me. I'm such a timid person. How could I possibly kill anyone? Let me tell you, if you can't find evidence to prove I killed someone, you must make this damn woman publicly apologize to me." David Liu gritted his teeth, doing his best to appear innocent. Meanwhile, the officers systematically checked every corner of his apartment. Finally, I saw them glance at each other and walk towards the door. "We haven't found anything unusual." David Liu breathed a sigh of relief at these words. He then began to cry, recounting my supposed malicious behavior. "This damn woman, not sleeping in the middle of the night, causing trouble for no reason, saying I murdered someone in the resident chat group. Officers, this is blatant slander. You must help me get justice." But no one responded to him. An older officer turned around, his sharp gaze sweeping over the women's lingerie hanging on the balcony. "Where's your wife?" As soon as he spoke, David Liu's wailing stopped abruptly. He hesitated for 2 seconds, then forced a smile. "She just went out to buy some late-night food." As he spoke, David Liu called his wife to confirm. Under everyone's watchful eyes, a sweet female voice quickly came through the phone. "Honey, what's wrong?" "This place is so crowded, I'll be in line for a long time." "Please wait a little longer for me." "You've had a tough night. I'll make it up to you when I get home." When I heard that familiar voice, I froze. Because it really was David Liu's wife's voice. Sweet, soft, and a little faint. Exactly the voice of a gentle wife. Moreover, I could tell it wasn't a recording. Had I misheard before? Had I wrongly accused David Liu? I couldn't help but begin to doubt myself. Yet it was clear that an hour ago I had heard David Liu using a knife to kill his wife, and she had weakly pleaded for her life. The atmosphere immediately solidified. All the police officers looked at me in unison. Neighborly disputes are normal, but don't deliberately waste police resources. A couple's affection isn't illegal. Seeing me being chastised by the police, David Liu's lips curled slightly, as if he was trying to suppress his inner triumph. In that moment, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. David Liu then chimed in. "Out of respect for our neighbors, all you need to do is post a public apology. If I had truly accused him without cause, this request might seem generous. But I was absolutely certain I hadn't misheard. An hour ago, David Liu had committed murder because my ears would not deceive me. So I desperately pleaded with the police to check again. Officers, I'm not lying. He killed someone, and the victim was a woman whose voice was very similar to his wife's. I spoke in a state of extreme anxiety. A few young officers looked towards Captain Zhao, awaiting his decision. After receiving his nod of approval, they continued to search the apartment. I stood by the door, trembling and watching, until someone shouted, "Captain Zhao!" We found fresh bloodstains here. David Liu's face instantly went ashen, as if facing a great catastrophe. He shook his head, hurriedly trying to explain. That's chicken blood, used for warding off evil and misfortune. My health isn't good, so someone told me about that folk remedy. Captain Zhao knelt down to sniff carefully, quickly reaching a conclusion. It's chicken blood. As these words were uttered, the tense atmosphere quickly dissipated. It seemed the officers all secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Though I felt extremely unwilling, I trudged away. But before I could even step out the door, Mrs. Gao from downstairs suddenly rushed up, crying and cursing. This heartless dog. Every day he's making those noises, giving my old man heart attacks. He's in intensive care right now. Officers, you need to rein this guy in. This dog has been making those disgusting noises for 3 days. Straight! He almost killed my old man. Mrs. Gao spoke agitatedly, pulling out her phone from her pocket and repeatedly playing a recording that made everyone blush. This is the disgusting noise that guy made. A full 40 minutes of it. Listen! Listen! Is there any decency left? The atmosphere in the room suddenly became extremely awkward. At the same time, the prolonged, rising and falling gasps unexpectedly rushed into my ears. I listened more carefully. In those gasps, there was also a very faint sound, dripping water. The dripping water was very regular and small, clearly coming from a shower head. So, the dismemberment site must be in the bathroom. I closed my eyes and focused, patiently listening through the entire recording. From beginning to end, the recording contained the sound of water dripping from a shower head. This indicated that after dismembering the body, the culprit had not transported it away. In that instant, it was as if I suddenly understood. Without hesitation, I immediately rushed towards David Liu's bathroom, ignoring the stunned gazes of everyone present. Officers. Officers right here in the bathroom. The police reacted very quickly, and before long, they found the victim's body hidden in the cabinet under the sink in the bathroom. The body was not intact, its face completely disfigured, beyond recognition. When this bloody scene met our eyes, Mrs. Gao and I both quickly squatted down and vomited violently. After vomiting, Mrs. Gao couldn't help but curse. This inhuman monster. Why kill someone in your own home for no reason? Now, look what's happened. The property value of this entire building is about to plummet. At this point, the police had completely restrained David Liu. He couldn't move, only able to resist the old woman's insults with his eyes. I, however, stood by the door, once again falling into deep thought. I hadn't been home 2 days ago, so I'd only heard David Liu committing murder this time. But just now, Mrs. Gao said David Liu had been making such disgusting noises for 3 consecutive days. Could David Liu have been killing for 3 days straight? Unable to suppress the doubt in my heart, I proactively asked Mrs. Gao to play the recordings from the 2 previous days. The recording from the first day and tonight's recording were almost identical. Still, the gasps, still the dripping water, with only one difference. There were no victims' cries for help. Could it be that David Liu didn't kill anyone that day? I started to feel confused, so I clung to the phone screen, replaying it from the beginning, forcing myself to concentrate completely and listen to every detail. When I reached the middle of the recording, my heart suddenly skipped a beat. Yes, I had a new discovery. There was a faint gasp, lasting only 2 or 3 seconds, extremely fragile, like the victim's last breath. After that, the gasps paused, and chopping sounds began to ring out in the recording, interspersed with the sound of dripping water. Based on the sharp, clean sound of the blade as it struck, I could deduce that the victim likely had a frail body and loose skin, highly probable a person suffering from muscle atrophy. And muscle atrophy is often related to prolonged bedridden conditions. I remember David Liu once posted an advertisement for a nursing home in the resident chat group, stating that his mother was paralyzed and received excellent care there, making it worth recommending to everyone. So, the person David Liu murdered on the first day was his own biological mother? As soon as this thought struck me, my blood boiled with anger. This beast, so cruel as to murder his own mother. I turned and glared at David Liu with sharp eyes. It seemed David Liu had anticipated what I had deduced. A cold, threatening look appearing in his eyes. Not far away, Captain Zhao walked over. "Little girl, what did you hear this time?" I recounted the results of my sound analysis word for word. After listening, Captain Zhao's face clearly showed indignation and sorrow. He walked up to David Liu. "Confess honestly, how many people have you killed?" But Captain Zhao's questioning received no response because David Liu clenched his teeth, not uttering a single word. Yes, at this point, I was only using sounds to deduce that he had murdered his mother. But there was no concrete evidence to accuse him. As long as he didn't admit it legally, he could only be concluded to have murdered one person. Of course, the crime of killing one person and killing multiple people are vastly different. David Liu was a smart man. He wouldn't put himself in that position. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my chaotic emotions, and continued to listen to the recording from the second day. The background sounds from that day hadn't changed at all. Gasps, interspersed with dripping water, brief and faint. The only difference was an added sound of a body colliding, or more precisely, the sound of heels scraping against the ground. This was the instinctive reaction of a victim's body when facing danger. The sound of heels was sometimes heavy, sometimes light, with an irregular rhythm. This indicated that the victim might have a leg disability. I suddenly remembered David Liu's father used to come here to deliver vegetables. That day was scorching hot, and coincidentally the elevator was being repaired. I briefly saw David Liu's father carrying a bag of vegetables, pushing his way up the stairs with a limp, step by step, to knock on his son's door. The answer gradually became clear, but I felt no joy at all. On the contrary, my heart was heavy with pain. I remembered that day when I accidentally met David Liu's father on the stairs. He not only enthusiastically handed me a large bunch of green vegetables, but also laughed heartily, saying, "Homegrown vegetables, no pesticides, very delicious. Little girl, you're too thin. You should eat more rice." I never imagined that this honest, kind man would be murdered by his own son. An unnamed fire suddenly ignited within me. I could barely control my clenched fists. This scum, to treat his own parents like that. As I tried to control the rage in my heart, I observed him. David Liu was less than 3 meters from me. Seeing my dejected appearance, he suddenly smirked. That smile was incredibly dazzling and arrogant, as if he had already secured victory. In that moment, I admit I was completely panicked. Currently, I was only relying on sounds to deduce that David Liu had killed his parents, but I couldn't provide any evidence to prove my reasoning was correct. Furthermore, the bodies of David Liu's parents were still a mystery. No bodies meant all deductions were mere theories. Thinking this, my mind became even more chaotic, feeling as if hundreds of ants were crawling in my brain, making it impossible for me to calm down. Due to the extreme tension, I accidentally paused the playing recording. But exactly 1 second before the recording was cut off, a strange sound suddenly rushed into my head. It sounded like David Liu's shoe sole scraping against the tiled floor, and the sound was very sticky. This indicated that David Liu's shoe sole had stuck to something, and that something was both damp and persistent, not easy to wash off. I quickly looked up, secretly observing David Liu's shoe soles. It seemed there really were specks of yellow soil on those dull black soles. Yellow soil on his soles. A flash of light suddenly sparked in my mind. It was soil from an old grave. David Liu had been to the ancestral burial ground. It was highly possible that the other 2 bodies had been hidden in David Liu's family's ancestral grave. Upon hearing the results of my sound analysis, the police dared not be negligent and immediately mobilized reinforcements to the Liu family's ancestral burial ground that very night. Sure enough, they unearthed the bodies of his parents there. Faced with irrefutable evidence, no matter how stubborn David Liu was, he had to meekly confess and accept his punishment. He admitted to personally murdering his wife and parents. 2 days prior, after murdering his parents, he still had time to bury their bodies in the ancestral grave. On the 3rd day, however, under my strong intervention, he had to frantically stuff his wife's body into the bathroom cabinet. Furthermore, to mislead the investigation, David Liu even made his daughter impersonate her mother's voice over the phone to deceive us. It's a pity that 1 wrong step leads to 1,000 wrong steps. No matter how cunning a lie, it will crumble to dust in the face of truth and evidence. After the truth of the case was revealed, I secretly moved and changed my address, but Captain Joe had no intention of letting me go. He brought me to the interrogation room and stated decisively, "Alice, you deceived us. You are not a sound analysis expert, but the manipulator who orchestrated David Liu's murders." In the cold space, Captain Joe's expression was more solemn than ever. He pulled out an old newspaper from 10 years ago. The newspaper featured a news report with the headline, "If I had another chance, I would definitely support my sister in dropping out of school." In that instant, all the painful memories flooded back like a torrent. My mind was slowly pulled back to the catastrophic earthquake 10 years ago. 10 years ago, a severe earthquake struck this city. I was just 20 years old then, and my younger sister, Lily, was only 1 month away from her university entrance exam. That day was a Monday, and Lily kept grumbling, wanting to skip the exam. She said she was just a fool, not a person with any academic aptitude, and even if she took the university entrance exam, she would only bring shame upon herself. My father didn't wait for her to finish speaking before flying into a rage, raising his hand to hit her. I quickly pulled my sister away and ran outside, preparing to take her back to school. All the way there, my sister kept pouting. "Sis, I don't want to go back to school. I want to go home and play games." At that time, I didn't think twice and bluntly refused her request, dragging her to school no matter what. I didn't know then that it would be the last time I saw my sister. At 2 p.m., the earthquake struck. All the buildings shook violently. Thanks to quick reflexes, my parents and I managed to escape our home in time, avoiding a disaster. But my sister wasn't so lucky. She was buried in the rubble, never to return. That century-old school collapsed in an instant. Not a single teacher or student survived. When the news came, my entire family was plunged into unbearable grief. From that moment on, I became the family scapegoat. If you hadn't taken her back to school, your sister wouldn't have died. My mother shrieked madly. My father was like a ghost, trembling every day at the rubble, digging for my sister's body. Lily, this building has 8 floors. Your classroom was on the 3rd. Father knows you're gone, but father desperately wants to bring you home. Lily, come home. I promise I won't scold you anymore. This tragic scene successfully attracted the attention of reporters. They then sought me out and wrote a tear-jerking article. At this point, Captain Zhao suddenly slammed the table, interrupting me. He said solemnly, "But the truth is, your sister didn't die in that earthquake, did she?" Captain Zhao presented the second piece of evidence, a video of a circus performance. In the video, a girl with a strange body tremblingly squeezed herself into a narrow pipe. When the girl successfully emerged from the other end of the pipe, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. When this scene ended, a familiar sharp pain filled every corner of my body. Because the girl in that video was my sister, Lily. Vague memories gradually became clear in my mind. That year, after the earthquake, our home lost its happy laughter due to my sister's passing. Although my parents tried their best to suppress their dissatisfaction with me, striving to create a harmonious atmosphere, things could never return to how they were. Everything had changed. On my 23rd birthday, my father got drunk. He choked up, raising his wine glass. Our family can never be completely reunited again. That dinner was agonizing, as everyone at the table had tears in their eyes. But the tragedy didn't stop there. After that meal, my father jumped to his death. From a warm family of 4, in the blink of an eye, only my mother and I were left, living in torment and fear. That sorrowful feeling was indescribable. Every night, regret and longing would overwhelm me, making it impossible to breathe. Not long after my father's death, my mother also took her own life. The large house was ultimately left to me to guard alone. On my 29th birthday, I accidentally passed by a circus performance. The moment the show began, I involuntarily opened my eyes wide. The scene was truly too unexpected, because I saw my sister, Lily. Yes, she wasn't dead. Although her body was horribly disfigured at this point, I recognized her immediately, because that face had appeared 10,000 times in my dream. After the performance, I couldn't wait to find my sister. Or, to be more precise, the sister who had been tortured into a half-human, half-ghost state. My sister had lost all her limbs and was mute. When she saw me, she cried until she almost fainted. Because she couldn't speak, she could only hold chopsticks and write her experiences on the ground. It turned out that on the day of the earthquake, she hadn't returned to school. She had waited for me to leave, then secretly gone to a nearby internet cafe. When the earthquake struck, she was rescued by David Liu, the owner of the internet cafe. But to earn dirty money, David Liu not only didn't take my sister home, but also imprisoned her in his truck. To prevent my sister from escaping, David Liu not only crippled her, but also gave her medicine to make her mute. After the earthquake rescue efforts ended, and the outside world was no longer tense, David Liu sold my sister at a high price to a circus troupe in another province. From then on, my sister fell into a living hell. The moment I learned the truth, my palms clenched painfully. So, you intended to seek revenge on David Liu, didn't you? Captain Joe tapped his fingers, his eyes firm as if he had already won. Unfortunately, I wouldn't let him have his way. I pulled myself out of the painful memories, smiling faintly, as if nothing had happened. Perhaps you don't know, but I'm only an adopted child of the Bai family. Lily and I have no blood relation whatsoever. Why should I seek revenge for someone with whom I share no blood? I'm not stupid. My future path is long. There's no need to risk my life for others. I spread my hands, speaking with a hint of sorrow. Captain Zhao's temples throbbed with a blue vein because I was not as docile as he had imagined. The second day after reuniting with Lily, something happened to her. She had an accident during a performance, her body getting stuck in a narrow pipe and never managing to escape. When the devastating news arrived, I was decorating our new home. The circus owner had promised that as soon as my sister completed that tour, he would completely terminate her contract. I kept thinking that everything was moving in a good direction. I kept thinking that my shattered family was about to be happy again. But fate just loved to play cruel tricks. After meticulously arranging my sister's funeral, the words she had written that day began to echo endlessly in my mind. Sister, you are only adopted. We have no blood relation. There's no need to seek revenge for me. Your life is still very long. There's no need to risk it for me. Captain Joe's face was weary. He pulled out the third piece of evidence, a receipt for a miniature camera. We found a camera of the same type you purchased in the transaction records at David Liu's home. This camera was installed without David Liu's knowledge. The building management confirmed that you once used the excuse of a leak in his apartment to request a key. At that time, David Liu's home was empty, giving you ample time to install this camera. Through this camera, you monitored David Liu's every move. This is also why you knew David Liu's murder process so clearly. Captain Zhao spoke without pause, his voice chilling to the bone. I forced a smile and explained, I've always been helpful to people, and helping Mrs. Zhao buy a camera is no big deal. Furthermore, I never asked the building management for David Liu's house key. On the contrary, Mrs. Gao once borrowed my phone to make a call. I still have the recording of that call here. As I spoke, I asked Captain Zhao to play the recording on my phone right there. In the recording, with an angry tone, Mrs. Yao demanded the key from the building management. The upstairs apartment is leaking so badly. Are you going to deal with it or not? I demand you immediately bring David Liu's house key to my door. I want to check the cause of the leak. The voice on the other end was full of yeses and frantic apologies, as if wanting to kneel, and eventually delivered the key into her hand. As for what Mrs. Gao did with the key, no one knew. Hearing this, Captain Zhou's face clearly turned pale. It seemed his mind was completely confused. But why would Mrs. Gao want to take revenge on David Liu? I pointed to the newspaper in Captain Zhou's hand. In the middle of the newspaper was a group photo, which included my sister Lily and Mrs. Zhao's granddaughter, Grace Zhao. Yes, they were classmates. On the day of the earthquake, the two girls skipped school and went to David Liu's internet cafe. Initially, Mrs. Gao also thought her granddaughter had died under the rubble. Like other parents, she was constantly immersed in painful memories, unable to escape. Many years later, she saw Grace Gao struggling by the roadside, barely alive. Grace Gao, like my sister, had been crippled by David Liu and forced to take mute-inducing drugs. The endless beatings and verbal abuse had made the girl simple-minded, only knowing how to mechanically hold out a bowl to beg for food. Mrs. Gao recognized Grace Gao without any difficulty. Why? She painfully embraced the dirty Grace Gao, but just as she was about to express the longing of so many years, Grace Gao suddenly took a faint breath. Before she died, she kept mouthing David Liu. David Liu! This name immediately shocked Mrs. Gao back to reality. She decided to thoroughly investigate David Liu. So, she intentionally moved to the apartment downstairs from David Liu. In between, she asked me to buy a camera, secretly installed it in David Liu's house herself, and monitored his every move. Finally, one day, David Liu revealed his true colors. He was completely drunk, shouting, "I'm truly lucky. I even made a fortune from the earthquake. It's those unlucky girls' fault. They met me during the earthquake. I chopped off all their limbs and sold them elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of yuan just effortlessly fell into my hands." It was in that moment that Mrs. Gao made up her mind to take revenge. Mrs. Gao was a woman of great suffering. When she was 50, her son and daughter-in-law died in a car accident. When she was 60, she experienced the earthquake disaster, mistakenly believing that her granddaughter, whom she had raised herself, had also died. It wasn't until she was 70 that she unexpectedly learned the truth about her granddaughter's harm. One hardship after another didn't make her surrender. Instead, it made her stronger with each setback. When she was young, Mrs. Gao was a psychology teacher. She was very knowledgeable about psychological hypnosis. So, she used that hidden surveillance camera to secretly hypnotize David Liu, step by step, guiding him to murder his own flesh and blood. To prevent outsiders from disrupting the murder plan, Mrs. Gao instructed David Liu that each time he killed someone, he should use grotesque moans to cover up the crime. Unfortunately, the effect of hypnosis was limited. Every time David Liu woke up, he had to face bloody corpses. Terrified to his core, he trembled with fear while trying to calm down and dispose of the bodies, hiding his murderous secret. And I, naturally sensitive to sound, accidentally became the one who broke this deadlock. I only learned all of Mrs. Gao's secrets the night before I moved. That night, Mrs. Gao invited me to her house. Her face was full of wrinkles then, her steps unsteady. She spoon-fed her bedridden, sick husband, spoonful by spoonful. "Child, promise me, after I die, please visit him often at the nursing home, so he has a little hope, so he can live a few more days." When the police arrived at Mrs. Gao's house, she had already passed away. On the table was a will she had written, the contents of which perfectly matched what I had just recounted. At this point, the truth of the case had become clear. Following Mrs. Gao's instructions, I visited Mr. Gao at the nursing home every weekend. He couldn't take care of himself. Even the drool at the corners of his mouth needed specialized staff to wipe it away. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with excitement. I wheeled him out to the courtyard to bask in the sun as usual. In the middle of the lawn, the wheelchair suddenly stopped. I squatted down, facing Mr. Gao's gentle eyes. Then, without changing my expression, I softly uttered a sentence that pierced his heart. Actually, Ye was the mastermind who manipulated David Liu into killing. As soon as I finished speaking, the corners of Mr. Gao's mouth twitched rapidly. He glared at me as if he were facing a devil in human skin. I chuckled softly and leaned closer, using my back to obscure the gaze of the medical staff watching from afar. "If it weren't for your granddaughter, Grace Gao, my sister wouldn't have died. My parents wouldn't have had to pass away in such pain either. That day, when I dragged my sister back to school, she was pulled away by Grace Gao. Grace Gao had been spoiled by her family since childhood, a rebellious bully in class. She had tormented my sister many times, and my sister just endured it, afraid of trouble. On the day she was supposed to return to school, Grace Gao snatched my sister's living allowance. My sister chased after her, begging Grace Gao to return her money. This is the money my parents worked so hard to save. They're struggling. Even when they're sick, they don't dare buy medicine. Please, I beg you, give me back my money. As long as you give it back, I promise I won't bother you anymore. I'll go straight home. I definitely won't be an eyesore for you." My sister even humbled herself, kowtowing, but Grace Gao remained unmoved. She waved her hand, distributing my sister's living allowance to her friends. "Let's have fun today." As they spoke, they burst into laughter and went into the internet cafe. My sister, unwilling to give up, followed them in. The earthquake that day struck without warning. I only remember that in the moment the world spun, my sister was dragged out by David Liu, then imprisoned in his small truck. I bowed my head and gently slipped a peeled apple slice into Mr. Gao's mouth. "Andin ni. Gary, it's so alternate." Doing so, others wouldn't hear his painful sob. Everyone was deceived. The truth is, Grace Gao had died long ago. She died in the earthquake. David Liu had no opportunity to rescue her at all. In fact, the beggar who looked exactly like Grace Gao was someone I found to impersonate her. At that time, she was close to death. Her only wish was to eat a piece of cotton candy. I fulfilled her wish. After that, I spent 3 days teaching her to mouth the 3 words, David Liu. That's how everyone fell into my trap. I could use Mrs. Gao to take revenge on David Liu. As I spoke, tears welled up in Mr. Gao's eyes. He wanted to open his mouth to curse me, but found he couldn't because the apple had firmly blocked his mouth. Even more terrifying, the medical staff behind us had quietly walked away. Mr. Gao had lost his last chance to call for help. There was another secret he probably never dreamed of. I used only a string of small bells to successfully manipulate David Liu into killing. That year, to deceive everyone and prevent anyone from discovering he was holding girls captive in his truck, David Liu devised a special method of communication. Because of this, his footsteps always carried an air of hurriedness and panic. Every time the bell rang, it meant the girls in the truck would endure a beating. This method was simple, yet effective, easily suppressing the girls. In the thick darkness of the truck, the ringing bell sounded like the call of death, tightening their hearts, making them afraid to make a move. Even when they were crippled, they dared not utter a sound. Thus, they were trained to be slaves to the bell. Later, I also adopted David Liu's method, secretly adding the sound of bells to Mrs. Gao's hypnosis process for David Liu. Every time the bell rang, David Liu would tremble uncontrollably. He couldn't help but recall the girls he had harmed. Is there an answer? Some died, others were crippled. In the dark night, they were like ghosts surrounding him, completely disorienting his consciousness. He began to fall into a state of intense stress. Eventually, the crushing fear in his heart gradually devoured his reason, making him unconsciously pick up a knife, unconsciously kill his own family. Every time I thought of David Liu's suffering after each time he regained consciousness, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. As the last rays of twilight faded, I pushed Mr. Gao back to his room. He trembled, curled up in his wheelchair, the lower part of his body gradually soaking with a mixed reddish-yellow fluid. The next day, the nursing home director sent a message. Mr. Gao had passed away. When I received that news, I was sitting idly in the cemetery. In that very moment, 3 dandelion seeds gently floated by, landing on the back of my hand. A warmth slowly seeped back into me. How I, you say that thought disease.